Everybody gets cancer 7 times a day on average, but our immune system kills these cancer cells, fights these cancer cells, so we never even know it. But when your immune cells start getting short telomeres, they start suffering from what's called immune senescence, and they lose the ability to fight the cancer cells. When somebody says they've cured aging, they haven't really cured aging unless somebody passes what I call the Betty White test. They go from looking and feeling and behaving 85 to looking and feeling and behaving 25. I have seen some 85-year-olds and 95-year-olds showing some tremendous age reversal. People going from walkers at 95 to dancing.
200-year life. Aim higher.
Okay, welcome to another episode of the 200-Year Life Project. Today, I'm really excited about this interview we have. We have Dr. Bill Andrews. Bill, welcome to the show.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
Let me read a few things about you that I found instead of just, I don't like to make someone have to give me their whole bio, so I try to help them out, and you can tell me if I'm on track. I believe you are one of the most knowledgeable people in life longevity, especially telomeres, that there is. You want to solve aging. That's been your goal since your dad asked you if you would be interested in that when you were 10 years old. So you've been working on this a long, long time. I found interesting, you have world records. Now, this has nothing to do with aging, in barefoot skiing and in running mega races, I guess, mega marathons, 100-yard, 100-mile type races.
Yeah.
Yep. And let's see, what else did I have here?
And for the record, it's water skiing. I don't want anybody to think I was barefooting in the snow.
No, yeah. I guess I grew up on the coast, so when I heard barefoot, that's what I
I
thought
used to
of.
hold the world speed record for barefoot water skiing.
Really? Wow,
Yeah.
I was going to ask you what the record was.
And people that I competed with died during these events, and it's
Oh,
like,
it was so fast.
yeah, it was you fall at those speeds. It's like very easy to die from the hitting the water so hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that. Well, I grew up on, like I said, the East Coast in Charleston, South Carolina, and we used to ski up and down the rivers. And I was not, every time I could drop that one ski, but every time I tried to drop that other ski, I was gone. But all my friends could water ski, and they usually wore tennis shoes to keep the bottom of their feet from getting beat up. So
They
I
had to do that after I broke the record and my feet were totally trashed. The American Water Ski Association made a rule that you can no longer do it barefoot. You have to do it with wetsuit booties on. And so right away, the world record went up 20 miles per hour.
oh,
But I'm
because
still the fastest in the world, I think, on bare feet.
doing bare feet. Well, I guess that would make, yeah. That's why they wore tennis shoes, I guess. You also, let's see, you have Sierra Sciences. That's your company that you
Yeah.
run. And also, I want to mention to everybody, and I want to start with this because I thought this was really interesting. Your movie or documentary you were in that was really good. Not see the name of it, but it's like what's the
The
name of it?
Immortalist. It's called The
Thank you.
Immortalist. Yes.
I thought I watched that last night and this morning, and that's about what, 8 years old or something.
It was launched in 2014.
14. Okay, I thought that was a great documentary. I really did. But that's the basics I have on you. Is there anything I'm missing that we want to make sure we get in here?
Well, just anybody who watches that Immortalist, they should probably keep their kids away from, because there are some scenes by my co-star Aubrey de Grey that probably you wouldn't want your children to watch. But yeah, it's actually a really good documentary. It almost won an Oscar. It actually got into the top 10 for new documentary, but it didn't make the top 5, and they only show the top 5 during the Academy Awards.
Well, I definitely also, speaking of him, I want to get Aubrey on the show in the future. So it seems to be.
He's actually amazing.
Yeah.
He and I have been colleagues for almost 30 years.
Well, he is a very knowledgeable guy, and everybody who had talked to him or said anything says the same thing. But let's go on to telomeres now, because that's the big key subject right here. And I love the analogies you make for telomeres. And for life longevity, you're so good at that. For instance, your analogy on telomeres are like, well, you have two of them, I think, are good. Explaining them as shoestrings. And when your tips of the shoestrings.
Well, that's actually Elizabeth Blackburn, who got the Nobel Prize in telomere and telomerase biology. That was her analogy. I'm not in favor of it because it talks about how the caps on your shoelaces start failing your shoelaces from wear and tear. Okay, the caps get shorter and shorter, but telomeres don't really shorten by wear and tear. There's one publication that came out 20 years ago where somebody claimed that it did, but it's actually it's not a wear and tear issue. And I'll come back to that, but but I like the telomere, the shoelace analogy, because it explains where the telomere is on the chromosomes. It's, if you think of your chromosome like a shoelace, shoelaces have these caps called aglets, and the aglets protect the chromosomes. Well, telomeres are also there to protect. I'm sorry, aglets protect the shoelaces, but telomeres are the same thing in that they do protect the chromosome, but they don't get shorter because of wear and tear. I mean, there's a maybe 1% of the time it is caused by wear and tear, but most of the time it's called by something called the end replication problem. And so what I do is I explain telomeres in two ways. One, I explain them like they're ride tickets at an amusement park. Okay. So every time a cell divides, you lose a ticket. Okay. But it's not from wear and tear. The next part the next analogy I use is I explain why they get shorter or why you lose a ticket. And it's because it's the lack of ability of the cell to duplicate or replicate the chromosome all the way to the very tips when it has to make another copy of it before cell division. Okay, so what I do is I compare it to making a new row of bricks on a brick wall. Okay, so you got a brick wall, you got a bricklayer standing on top of the wall, stepping backward, laying a brick, stepping backward, laying another brick, stepping backward, laying another brick. And when that bricklayer gets to the very end of the wall, he or she falls off, and that new row of bricks ends up being shorter than the previous row. Okay. So then the bricklayer starts the next row, which is in getting ready for next cell division. And again, gets to the end of the wall, falls off. And again, that new row of bricks is shorter than the previous one. So that's what's happening. The analogy is so accurate. It's amazing because the bricklayer is called DNA polymerase 1 inside of our cells, and it goes along, but it cannot get to the very end of the chromosome. It falls off. Okay. Essentially. There's actually, I explain it in much more biochemical methods. It's not actually falling off, but it's almost as close to it as possible. And so actually, the reason telomeres shorten is because our cells lack the ability to replicate all the way to the very tip of the chromosome every time a cell needs to divide and make a new copy of the chromosome so that the two daughter cells have the same chromosomes as the parent cell.
Now, if you're enjoying this content, please help me grow this channel with a like or subscribe or both, or either. Appreciated.
Okay, so that's the whole explanation. Now, the reason why our reproductive cells don't experience telomere shortening or loss of ride tickets is because they produce an enzyme called telomerase, which telomerase, I explain, is like an angel. I have this angel come in with a brick and put the brick in the last place. And so that the chromosome's not shorter. And the problem is that our reproductive cells are the only cells in our whole body that produce telomerase. And the only reason why it produces telomerase is so our kids are born as young as we are. Okay. And I mean, telomere biology is not a theory, it's a fact. And I don't know how much, let me just say that any scientist who's working on human cells in petri dishes knows that when they go to a vendor to buy new cells for their experiments, the catalog will show the age of the donor, how old that donor was when they provided the cells. Let's say they were skin cells. And then it'll also say how many times these cells have divided since being obtained from that donor. And the scientists can then use those numbers to calculate how many more times these cells can divide in the petri dish before they can't do any more experiments. And the more remaining number of cell divisions, the more the cells cost. Okay, so this is not theory. This is fact. Human cells can only divide a certain number of times. It's called the Hayflick limit. And from my research and others, we know it's because every time the cell divides, it loses a ride ticket or the telomeres get shorter. And when you run out of ride tickets, the cells can no longer divide. And it's like absolutely, it's 100% reproducible in the petri dish, on tissues and humans, but it's only true in humans, other non-human primates, dogs, cats, horses, sheep, pig, and deer. What we're talking about here does not exist in mice.
That was the question I had.
Yeah.
That was the question I had. So those, I mean, maybe there's one or two missing there or subspecies, but for the most part, that's all the animals that use telomeres, or what you just listed there. Not fish, not birds, not possums.
Rodents do use telomeres a little bit, but it's not until the end of life. They have telomerase produced in all their cells all the time. But then when they get to like 3 years old, the telomerase just drops off and there's sudden rapid telomere shortening. Okay, so that's part of why they get eliminated, but doesn't affect the aging because telomere shortening not only affects the limit on our lifespan, it also affects all the changes we see because telomeres have what are equivalent to called enhancer sequences. They have all the hallmarks of enhancer sequences, which can fold over onto the other chromosomes and regulate their turning on and off. This is another analogy I use. Every gene has what is equivalent to a dimmer switch next to it that turns it on and off to different levels. The dimmer switches are called promoters, but every gene, so genes are things that produce proteins like the pigment in your eyes, which it's not exactly but proteins, it produces proteins and RNAs that affect everything about you. And these on-off switches are dimmer switches. They can turn on at different levels. And it's the change in these dimmer switches that causes the changes in us that are correlated with aging. Aging is synchronous. We can walk down the street, we can look at anybody and we can estimate their age approximately just by looking at it. And that's true for people in the North and South Pole, people on the equator, where the environments are very different. And it's also, but it's like the hardest part was to explain why dogs and cats age at different rates than humans when the environment's the same. And it's all because now we know it's because of the position. It's called the telomere position effect. The position of the genes that affect aging relative to the telomeres. They're different in dogs and cats than they are in humans. So it's all piecing together as being totally not theory whatsoever. Telomere biology explains the absolute facts about everything about what aging is, why we age, how we age, and it provides us also with a solution of how not to age. Okay. Now that said, I don't want to make telomere biology sound like the only cause of aging. Other things
Right.
can cause aging too. And so you started off with the introduction about me being a telomere biologist focused on telomeres, but that's not me. I'm focused on trying to cure aging, whatever it takes. I've just come to the conclusion that the stick with the shortest fuse, stick of dynamite with the shortest fuse inside of our cells is the telomeres. And we got to put that fuse out before we can solve the other things that are causing us to age. But I mean, like mice and rodents and mice, rats, rabbits, they all age by oxidative stress and mitochondria dysfunction mostly. And we do too. But that stick of dynamite has a longer fuse in us. So we don't really suffer from that unless we're intense smokers or super obese. I believe once we solve the telomere shortening problem, I'm going to be able to live another 30 years. That will give me 30 more years to solve the other problems.
We need you getting on the stick on that, Bill. I'm 71, so we need
Yeah.
you moving on that.
I'm almost 75. So I'm worried about that. But I'm so looking forward to Aubrey de Grey and other people coming up with some of the other solutions that we're going to need after we solve the telomere shortening.
You know, one of the things, to go to your analogy with the tickets, you have a certain amount of tickets when you're born. And once you use up all those tickets, you're pretty much gone, to put it in simple terms. But what I found interesting about that was a statement that you said that I wouldn't have thought of, is that by the time you're born, just from developing and being born, you've used up half your tickets.
Yes.
I thought that was crazy. I'd never thought about it. I would have thought you were starting when you were born with a fresh batch, but you've got you've used a lot of them.
When you're conceived as a single cell embryo, you have the fresh batch. But you have literally, this is not theory. You have 100 ride tickets when you are a single cell embryo. When your one cell divides once and you become two cells, each of those cells have only 99 tickets left. Okay. Then there's 98, 97. Then when you're born, you have 50. Okay. So the rest of your life is all used up in these 50 cell divisions. And people think, how can a human being be made from just 50 cell divisions? Okay. Well, if you do the math on 2, 4, 8, 16, 32 math, you can find that one single cell dividing 100 times will make a mass larger than the planet Jupiter. Okay. So that is actually plenty. People always talk about how we lose like 40,000 cells a minute from our skin. And they say, how could that possibly be with only 100 cell divisions? But again, when you do it, you do the math, you find out that, wow, actually 40,000, we're surprised we don't lose more because mathematically we should even be losing more than 40,000 cells per minute from the rate of this 1, 2, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32 math. Exponential math is the other term for it. But it's just crazy how all these things have just all added up. I mean, it's just, I mean, I don't understand why everybody on the planet isn't focused on just solving the telomere shortening problem. But unfortunately, I think everybody is trying to find their niche, because we all know that telomere shortening isn't the only cause of aging. We've got to do a bunch of other things. Plus, there's also health. Aging and health are two different things as far as I'm concerned. So we do have tremendous health problems from inflammation and oxidative stress, even though those are the major causes of aging. They also affect overall health in general. And so it's good that everybody's working on trying to solve the other kind of problems, but they're going to end up being very important that they got solved later on after we solved the telomere shortening problem.
So that's the number one issue is in your book is the problem is lengthening that. I noticed, I kind of jumping around here. You have a product, you're not marketing it. You've licensed it to somebody to help with that. But I think can you tell me about that real quick?
Yeah, I actually, I'm not a marketer, but I do have it. It's called Telo-Vital. It's sitting right here, and it's a nutraceutical mixture of plant extracts or fractions of plant extracts that we discovered that actually will, when you take one of these pills, they'll get inside your cells and induce the production of this enzyme telomerase inside all your cells, not just your reproductive cells. And so as a result, you have some telomere lengthening that we don't normally have in our body. So to explain this product, I got to use an analogy. In our reproductive cells, we produce this enzyme telomerase, but in our reproductive cells, think of a tug of war. I keep putting my hands up. People keep wondering why I put my hands up, but I'm going to use a tug of war analogy. I'm filled with analogies, but I love them. But when a reproductive cell divides, we'll say people on the left side of the tug of war pull to shorten the telomeres. Okay, so when the cell divides, the telomeres do get shortened because the bricklayer doesn't put a brick on the last place. But then this enzyme telomerase, like an angel, comes in and puts that last brick in. So it's a tug of war back and forth. Cell divides, telomere gets shortened, telomerase relengthens. Cells divide, telomeres get shortened, telomerase relengthens. It's a tie. So the tug of war is a tie in our reproductive cells. Okay, in all the other cells of our body, we shut this gene off. And if you want to know why evolution or anything would do such a dumb thing, watch my videos on why we age, because I explain it very well. It's why it was important for the survival of our species to actually eliminate the longer lived. Okay. And that's in all the other cells of our body, every time our cells divide, telomere gets shorter, divides again, telomere gets shorter without any lengthening. Well, this product, Telo-Vital, now induces the gene that we have in all of our cells to produce telomerase that's just shut off. It now turns it back on. So now in our other cells besides our reproductive cells, so telomeres get shorter when the cells divide, but then Telo-Vital induces telomerase to relengthen. But it doesn't win. It doesn't tie the tug of war. Telo-Vital is not potent enough yet to tie the tug of war, but we are working round the clock here on finding more and more potent ingredients to make it so that it ties or wins that tug of war. But the key is, because people say, "Oh, it doesn't win the tug of war. What good is that?" It slows down the tug of war. So right now, when we do the math on the number of, how long can a person live at the maximum level and live healthy, not just live healthy. Given the math, you can't possibly live longer than 125 years because of telomere shortening. No matter how great your lifestyle is, no matter how great your genetics are, you cannot live longer than 125 years. Okay, now with putting these people on the other side of this tug of war, we can live longer than 125, live healthy longer than 125. Let me put that. And we don't know yet how long. Okay, it's like, but I'll tell you, I'm taking Telo-Vital every single day, and a lot of people are doing it, and we are. Surprisingly, and I'm a scientist, so I don't get into anecdotal results, but I have seen some 85-year-olds and 95-year-olds showing some tremendous age reversal. People going from walkers at 95 to dancing. Okay. People barely able to speak during Zoom calls and things like that, suddenly being so alive, you can't get them to shut up. Okay. It's amazing what this Telo-Vital product is doing. And I'm very dissatisfied because it's not as potent as I'd like it to be. My big goal in life, my father was a TV producer. So we had a lot of movie stars and things like that at the house all the time. And one of my father's best friends was Betty White. Okay. And so I was really good friends with Betty White. And so I started this thing a long time ago that, I started showing pictures of Betty White when she was 85 and 25. And I say, when somebody says they've cured aging, they haven't really cured aging unless somebody passes what I call the Betty White test. They go from looking and feeling and behaving 85 to looking and feeling and behaving 25. I always wanted Betty White to walk out on stage and everybody be stunned at the fact that she looks, feels, and behaves 25 again. But we haven't gotten there. And that's why I'm still working on that. She passed away. I'm just sick about it. There'll never be another Betty White. But I'm still obsessed with the fact that 150,000 people are dying every day. And Liz Parrish made a big point about that during her podcast with you. I think Liz Parrish is the top person in the world to actually, if anybody wants to ever see a cure for aging, they got to follow Liz Parrish. Her
That's a
company,
that's a
BioViva.
that's a definite, and not only that, she's such a super nice person. But I'm not ready to leave this subject yet because first of all, I want to say I didn't bring Bill on to talk about this, but I found it this morning, like an hour ago, and started reading it and ordered it. So I wanted to find out from the horse's mouth about this. And I had one more question I want to ask you before we move on to Liz. On this, it says it has in turmeric and pomegranate extract. Does that mean I could get rid of those and just take this?
No, actually, that's so we have these high throughput robots here that can test like 4,000 different extracts, molecules a day in terms of their ability to induce telomerase. And we've tested over 1 million different compounds, probably 350,000 different molecules, chemicals, but plant extracts are the big thing. But we find that when you take whole plant extracts, if you take a pomegranate and you turn it into a powder, okay, and we test that, that never works, okay? That's because a typical plant extract is made up of over 200,000 different types of molecules, okay? And so whenever you have any kind of gamish like that, you've always got some molecules that might be activators, but there's going to be others going to inhibit those activators. So what we have to do is we have to first fractionate these plant extracts into like typically 30 different fractions where the molecules are divided into different like test tubes based on their size, based on their solubility, based on their other charges. Okay, let's give another example. So we get 30 different fractions out of like maybe 600,000 different plant extracts that we have tested, or fractions of plant extracts. We've only found 50 that work, okay, and that actually induce any detectable level of telomerase activity. And the most potent one that we ever discovered is turmeric, a fraction of turmeric. Now, this fraction just coincidentally happens to be missing curcumin, which is sad because curcumin is one of the most important anti-inflammatories there are on the planet. But we've done studies to find out it's not the presence of curcumin that made the other fractions not work. There's something else out of the 200,000 different molecules. So I still say to people, take your curcumin from some other source, but the turmeric in Telo-Vital does not contain curcumin, but it does contain something. And we don't know what it is yet because we haven't fractionated these things into their individual molecules, but it contains something that induces the production of telomerase to a higher level than anything else on the planet. And by the way, the only things that induce telomerase at all are things that have been discovered here at my company, Sierra Sciences. There's a lot of other products out there that claim to have products that induce telomerase, but they only say so because they can see that the telomeres in people's blood are longer after the treatment than before. But what they're missing is that you can get the telomeres to be longer in the blood after treatment by anything that's toxic or immunogenic, because this is crazy. It's like, I know I'm going off on tangents, but
You're
if you
fine.
have a company and you fire your dumbest employees, the average IQ of your company increases without anybody getting any smarter. Okay. So if you kill the cells with the shortest telomeres, the ones that are most sensitive to toxins, if you kill the cells with the shortest telomeres, the average length of telomeres that remain, the average length of telomeres in the cells that remain are longer, but nothing got lengthened. But now the bad thing is that your whole body, the average length got shorter because other cells have to now divide to replace those killed cells. So a lot of these products that are claiming to lengthen telomeres don't. They're actually shortening telomeres in the whole body. They just happen to look like they're lengthening telomeres in the blood. So I always say to people, boy, ask these companies if they have any data showing that they induce telomerase production. And Telo-Vital is the only one that does. We have plenty of data showing that it actually produces telomerase because telomerase is the only way to lengthen telomeres. And these companies, well, they've tested, they looked for telomerase. They don't see anything, but they don't understand why. But they saw telomeres get longer. So they say, well, it does produce telomerase. So our product's pretty good. But people got to be very careful. Number one, so if people didn't understand anything else I just said, they should, if somebody says they have a product that lengthens telomeres, ask them, do they have data showing their product induces the production of telomerase. If it does not, stay away from the product because it's actually going to accelerate your aging, not slow down your aging.
I want to go to your tug of war
Yes.
thing from a minute ago. You know, one side's pulling, shortening, one side's pulling, lengthening, so you're staying at the same spot. To me, with my thoughts of life longevity, I'm just trying to make it to that wave that starts coming. When the first one comes, that's a life extension of 10, 15, 20 years. And I want to be a sound minded body. So if I have something that's just keeping me in place, that sounds like a super win to me to get to that place where they start actually lengthening your lifespan. Because I don't want to, like, you know, get old, run out of telomeres and die like 2-3 years before that happens. So that sounds like a great product. And like I said, and this was not, Bill wasn't brought on to talk about this. I'm bringing this up because I'm interested. And when I bring people on, I talk about things I'm interested in for the audience out there. So I think that sounds like a win, that if it can keep me at all or even closer in check, or keep me so it's not happening as fast. It sounds like a win to me.
Well, that's exactly right. Dr. Terry Grossman coined one of the greatest phrases in the longevity field ever. And it's called live long enough to live forever. Okay. And so something like Telo-Vital is allowing you to live longer so you'll still be around when we come up with something that actually reverses aging. Okay. And Aubrey de Grey came up with a great expression too later called the longevity escape velocity. Okay. There's a point at which if you keep doing things to slow down your aging, and at the same time, science is coming up with ways of extending your lifespan longer and longer and longer, you'll be immortal, okay? Because you'll keep pace with this escape velocity. And so it's these kind of things. Yeah, and Telo-Vital, without a doubt, the number one best thing on the planet for making you live long enough to live forever, or that keep up with pace with this longevity escape velocity.
And I assume that this, you've licensed it to Nature's Country Store, and I assume that that's helping you raise more money so you can do more research. Yeah, because that's a wheel. You got to have the money or you can't do the research.
Yeah, and the company is called Touchstone Essentials, and their website is The Good Inside. I'm actually done due diligence on all their products. I actually have a podcast myself called Up One, where I do what's called critical meta-analysis of peer-reviewed studies, where I determine what's true and what's not true. Okay, because there's so many claims out there about peptides and stem cells and exosomes and things like that. Do they work or don't they work? So I do the critical meta-analysis to actually answer those kind of questions. And I've done that on all of Touchstone's products. And I've actually been now the biggest fan of the world on Touchstone, because I think all their products are important, because it's not just telomeres. We also have to reduce inflammation. We have to keep our sugar levels low. We have to keep our toxins low, heavy metals low, things like that. And I think Touchstone has the greatest array of products ever for doing that. And you would be shocked if you saw the array of all the products I have.
I'll take a look at that. I like I said, I found it on another site. So thank you for correcting me and telling me where to go. You know, what you just said, though, brought me to another point of something I saw you say in a previous statement. You were talking about toxins and things like that. You were talking about alcohol.
Yes.
Now, I drank heavy as a young person. I'll be honest with you. I used to like to drink when I was young. I don't drink at all anymore. I quit drinking, but I do have lots of friends who are my age in their 70s that are drinking still. And that's fine. That's their business. I'm not like going around telling them not to drink. They don't want me coming over, because that's the last thing someone who drinks wants you doing is telling them you shouldn't be drinking. But you were talking about livers, and the thing I saw drinking and the effects for a 25-year-old versus a 70-year-old because of your cells reproducing, I guess.
This is another analogy. This is an analogy I really love to, because people don't really understand aging as well as they do something like drinking alcohol. Okay. They're very similar. Okay. So here's the analogy. Everybody knows that drinking alcohol kills liver cells, but that's okay when you're young, because every time you kill a liver cell, there's another cell in your liver that's going to divide to replace that killed cell. So what's happening is, because you are killing cells in your liver at a faster rate than normal, the cell division to replace those killed cells is faster. So cells are dividing faster to keep up with replacing the killed cells. Well, every time a cell divides, you lose the ride ticket, the telomere gets shorter. And so by the time when you turn to be around 40, 50 years old, you run out of your ride tickets that normally you wouldn't have run out of until you were 90 to 100 years old. Okay, so now you've run out of them faster. So you essentially accelerated the age of your liver by accelerating telomere shortening. And that causes liver cirrhosis, because liver cirrhosis is really just an accumulation of dead cells on the surface of your liver, and there's nothing to replace those dead cells, because the only place to replace them is cell division from other cells. They don't exist anymore. So that's happening in our aging process, and that happens also in accelerated aging. When we smoke, we do that to our lungs. When we get infected with like the HIV, we do that to our immune system. Okay, that's another analogy. So when you get infected with HIV, not you or me, but some people, when somebody gets infected with HIV, remember in those days, people didn't know it at first. It was like sometimes years later before they suddenly started getting some symptoms of being infected. It was because the HIV would get in your cells and kill immune cells. But then that was okay when you first got infected, because other cells can divide to replace those immune cells. And so you would never even know it. But when the cells that are dividing to replace those immune cells run out of ride tickets, you suddenly can't replace those immune cells anymore, killed immune cells, and you have acquired immune deficiency. That's why it's called acquired immune deficiency syndrome, and for abbreviated AIDS. And so it's like an accelerated aging. And if we could keep the telomeres from shortening, people could drink all they want and never get liver cirrhosis. They could be infected with HIV and never have a single symptom, okay, live a normal life, even though they'd still be infected, because you would always have the ability to replace those immune cells by just adding ride tickets back. Just like if you use up all your ride tickets at an amusement park, you just go up to your mother and say, "Mother, please buy me more ride tickets." She gives you more ride tickets, you can keep going. Okay, so telomerase is like your mother.
Well, you were National Inventor of the Year for cancer, so you know something about cancer. And I know this is like way past it, but congratulations. That's such a big deal. Would lengthening your telomeres help with cancer too?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's like there's a lot of rumors going around the opposite, and it's because people don't really understand what cancer is. Even a lot of cancer doctors don't really understand what it is. I mean, I'm not moved on beyond the cancer. I do a lot of research here on cancer. Now, I believe that the number one cause of cancer is aging. It's not the only cause. I mean, there's children who still get cancer, but it is a major cause of aging. And so trying to solve that problem. But yeah, I've got several drugs in clinical studies right now that for cancer, and one just got approved called Rytelo, Rytelo, which I think is a really blockbuster. But I'm working on even better ones right now. And the bottom line is that, okay, so people don't understand what cancer is. Cancer is out of control cell growth, okay? But controlled cell growth is not cancer, okay? So what we are doing with telomerase and telomeres is we are providing more opportunities for the cells to divide when they need to divide, but we aren't making the cells divide out of control, okay? So cancer is when all of a sudden you have a mutation that suddenly gets rid of what's called a tumor suppressor gene or an oncogene, or it causes an induction of an oncogene that suddenly makes the cells start dividing out of control. And the big massive cells that gets results from that is what kills you, okay? And so what we are doing is we are only providing more opportunities. The cells still only divide when they're supposed to, okay? They just have more opportunities to divide. So it doesn't cause cancer. But a lot of people say, well, you're tuning on telomerase, and telomerase is going to allow cells to divide, and isn't that going to cause cancer? It was the exact opposite. Okay, so here's the thing, is that the number one cause of allowing cells to be mutated to become cancers is short telomeres. When telomeres get critically short, they induce skyrocketing mutation rates, okay? They're called chromotherpes and catages. These are mutations so massive that you can see them in the light microscope. Okay, so in my cancer research, I used to look at these things. Doctors can look at inside your cells, cancer cells, and they can see tremendous amounts of mutations just by looking in the light microscope. Okay, and those are what cause cancer. And so one of these mutations in a cancer cell will turn on the telomerase gene after the cell has already lost growth control, and now those cells that have lost growth control are now immortal. They've solved their aging process by turning on the telomerase gene by mutation. Okay, so suddenly you have an immortal cancer, then other mutations cause it to metastasize, it spreads all over. You chemotherapy, which kills the cells, but now the short telomeres are causing other mutations that make you resistant to the chemotherapy. So the cancers always come back. I mean, it's just a nightmare. So what we need to do is we need to figure out ways of keeping telomeres long, one, so that we don't ever get the mutations that cause the cancer. We also need to keep telomeres long in our immune cells because our immune cells are our best defense against cancer. I don't know, people don't know this, but everybody gets cancer 7 times a day on average. But our immune system kills these cancer cells, fights these cancer cells, so we never even know it. But when your immune cells start getting short telomeres, they start suffering from what's called immune senescence, and they lose the ability to fight the cancer cells. And so, keeping your immune cells with long telomeres, et cetera. I always say telomerase does not cause cancer. Cancer causes telomerase. Okay. The cancers with short telomeres induce telomerase, and that's when it's important. If you induce telomerase before the cell becomes cancer, chances of it ever becoming cancer are decreased immensely. I
That's
I can't say Telo-Vital will
mm,
help you with the cancer, but if I ever had
yeah.
cancer, I would be doing whatever I could to lengthen my telomeres.
Yeah, and that's kind of crazy. I had seen that mentioned that cancer has licked the longevity, but I didn't realize it was through the mutation. That was pretty interesting. Thanks for explaining that. Hey, I want to go on to something now that you were trying to bring up a minute ago, and I cut you off. I won't let you go there. But someone who I think is a great person, and I think from talking to you earlier, you did too, Liz Parish, who was on our last
Yeah.
episode. If you haven't seen that episode, you should go watch it. Liz is not only just a really nice person, she's a great speaker. If you watch that, my gosh, she's so good at speaking, and she's a smart individual, and she's done gene therapy on herself. Let's talk about Liz real quick since we both like her so much. What do you think about what she's doing? You told me earlier you thought that was going to be the major breakthrough was what she's doing when or something similar to that.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the key thing about Liz Parrish is she's not a scientist, but she understands the science of aging better than most scientists in the field of longevity. Okay. And she's like brilliant. But it's like she's also just obsessed with curing diseases. Okay. Not just aging, but all kinds of diseases, especially type 1 diabetes, because this is what got her on this trend is because her son has type 1 diabetes, and she'd like to see that go away. But she got really frustrated with the regulations and how science is being slowed down because you can't get drugs approved. And so scientists and companies are producing drugs just to make money instead of actually trying to actually treat or cure diseases. And so she got on the bandwagon, and she's leading that bandwagon right now. She did her master's thesis on something called best choice medicine, which is a total idea of completely revamping the FDA. Right now, if you have some life-threatening disease and doctor tells you have 6 months to live and you want to try a drug that you think can cure you, sorry, you can't do it because the FDA will say no. And then you die. Okay. Anyway. Okay. It's like, so best choice medicine is that if your doctor says you have a disease that's incurable and you have a disease that makes life not worth living, okay, you can try whatever you want, even if it hasn't been tested in animals. Okay. And that's called best choice medicine because the patient's choice is the best choice. Okay. So when she actually got her master's thesis on that, and it was big deal then. When she wanted to publish it, she needed a scientist on the paper. And so she contacted me to be a co-author on the paper. I feel grateful to be included on that because I'm a big believer in it, but it's her brainchild. And so there's actually the Coalition for Radical Life Extension is actually now arranging a march in Washington, D.C. at the Lincoln Memorial in 2027 to actually promote that. And what we've heard is that Robert Kennedy Jr. is actually on board and maybe will even be one of the speakers at that event. So this is being big change. And this will be really fantastic. This is all because of Liz Parrish.
Wow.
Okay. We can hopefully in the very near future have a new ruling that people with life-threatening diseases or diseases that make life not worth living can test on themselves on anything in hopes of saving their lives. And then what's going to happen, the side effect is that these drugs are going to get approved to the FDA faster too, so that people that are not suffering from life-threatening diseases can also take those drugs or treatments or whatever.
Where can you find out more information about that then?
Well, it's published. She and I published the paper. I can give you the link to that paper, but there's YouTube videos of both her and me talking about it on stage, and it's getting a lot of followers. There are other things similar to it called like Right to Try and things like that, which I think mostly got started in Montana, but is spreading to other states now. But even in the Right to Try, you can't test it on yourself unless it's already past phase 1 clinical studies. And that's so much cost and expense to even get into phase 1 that everybody's resorting to looking for other things that they don't need to do clinical studies on just to get profits or return on investments faster. Yeah, this is going to be a game changer, really big. But she's actually the thing that's about Liz Parish is that her company does not promote products just so her company can make money. Her company promotes products that actually work. And even though they're unaffordable by most people, those are the ones she promotes. She's not going to promote a product that doesn't work just because it's affordable. Okay. And so, but the mission is to make it so all these products are affordable. Okay. Because what the rich will save the poor is, I hate that expression, but it's like by coming up with treatments that the rich can afford will get us proof of concept
Right.
to allow us to get investors to spend more money on the products that will be more affordable that everybody can afford.
When Liz was on the show, she talked about how much gene therapy used to cost. It's already half. And that if she had the right investor, she could drop it from like, and the numbers might be wrong, but maybe it used to be like 1 million. Now it's like 500,000. But if she had the right investor, she felt they could drop that to 20,000, with the right money. Using that, now that I'm on that subject though, how much do you think it would cost to solve this telomere problem?
In my business plans, because I don't market, I just do the research. I would license every discovery I have to BioViva, Liz Parrish, just because of her mentality about what's right and wrong. But I estimate that it would cost me $130 million of research to come up with something that would be affordable, okay, for everybody. And that's extrapolate. I'm really good. We haven't talked about this, but I'm a key inventor of a lot of things like human growth hormone, tissue plasminogen activator, beta seron, erythropoietin. I
I
haven't
think you
listed
have
half of them.
50 patents.
Yeah, I have 50 patents, way more than 50 patents, but 50 just on the whole field of longevity. But all my cancer research, heart disease research. I mean, my gauge of success is not how much money I can make for investors or how many publications I can get. My gauge of success has always been how many diseases can I treat or cure. So I get finished with one disease and everybody says, oh, well, let's publish. I say, you publish. I'm going to go on to the next one. Okay. That's why I'm the middle author on many papers because I won't participate in the publications. But
Well, I saw a quote you made, sorry to interrupt you,
yeah,
is that you're not big on publishing, you're big on sharing.
yeah. And I that's what I do. And I speak at conferences. Without NDAs, I give out data, things like that, because I want everybody to, get on, follow follow through from the discoveries I've made, but I don't want to go through the dumb process of publishing. Peer reviewers have to, no matter if your paper is perfect, they have to find flaws with it and tell you to go back and do these experiments and those experiments, which takes up time and money. And it's all because they have to feel like they have to show they're doing their job because the journals will fire them as peer reviewers if they just say approved, approved, approved. And it's like, it's just a circular big nightmare of problems. And so I just stay out of it. I'm not in the academic field, so I don't have a publish or perish problem that I have to worry about like most people do in academic that are trying to get grants. But $130 million is the cost that I see to actually have something that will cure aging. And that's the cost of getting it to be ready for testing in clinical studies. And if we can get the best choice medicine thing approved before then, it'll be fast through clinical studies. But I think with $130 million, we could have that pill, whether it's a gene therapy or whatever, we could have that ready to go in 3 years.
We
Okay?
need to get Musk or someone like that on
You know,
board
Musk,
here, who that's a
Musk
pittance to.
Musk has openly said that he doesn't like the idea of curing aging. And, I've had every billionaire that you can imagine here in my company. I'm right across the street from the airport. There's an FBO right across the street. They'll park their big 747s or whatever right there, walk across the street, come here. But they're all like so hooked on quick return on investments, and they are so hooked on exit strategies and stuff like that. And I'm not. I used to have a lot of investors, and they all try to get me to create products to put on the market. And we did as we were told because they own the majority of the company. I did not. And then when we succeeded at everything, they wanted to sell the company for a profit. And I just was blown away. Fortunately, I orchestrated a complete takeover, and I now own 100% of my company. So I'm not going to let any investors come in now to my company and say, we want to invest, but we want you to start making products that bring in return on investment quickly. When we have a product that is going to cure aging and it's going to be marketed through either Touchstone Essentials or BioViva, depending on whether it's a nutraceutical or a pharmaceutical. Those companies are going to make, I don't even know what the number is, but let's say gazillion dollars, okay? If they could just be patient and not be so concerned about quick return on investments and be okay with, okay, so we'll wait a few years for our return on investment. It's like, it's just nonsense. But the whole world right now is running on the gauge of success of quick return on investments. All these investors, family offices, things like that, they all are trying to get quick returns, not cures and diseases. Treatments,
Right.
cures, treatments for diseases and disabilities.
Gotcha. Let me ask you a question real quick. What are the top 3 things you're doing for longevity personally?
Yeah, well,
And if you
Telo-Vital.
don't want to say something, don't, but I'm just curious.
No. Telo-Vital is the number one. But other things that I do are I protect my mitochondria health. Okay. I mean, mitochondria are extremely important, not just for aging, but for health overall. And so I take nicotinamide riboside, which I think is the best way of producing nicotinamide NAD, which is important for overall health, but it's mostly mitochondria.
How do you
Also
take that? How do you take that? I mean,
as
do
a
you do
pill.
injections or do you do pills or?
Yeah, the injections I think are a complete waste of time. I'm going to get cease and desist letters now for saying something like that. But I get my nicotinamide riboside from True Niagen, okay, or Life Extension. Both of them sell really great nicotinamide ribosides as a pill, okay. And I think there's no need to go to any other level that induces enough NAD levels in your body to be perfect. Way better than the competitor, which is called nicotinamide mononucleotide, which is NMN. Nicotinamide riboside works a lot better. It's just that the inventors of nicotinamide riboside are very picky about who they will allow to market their products. If they think their marketer is at all a charlatan, fake claims or something, they won't let that company market nicotinamide riboside. I'm super impressed with that. And so very few companies can market nicotinamide riboside, but True Niagen and Life Extension are examples of really good company. I should say Elysium Health is also another one that has it. And so those three. But I also take what's called urolithin A, which is produced by a company called Timeline. The product's called MitoPure. And what that does is it gets rid of dysfunctional mitochondria in your cells because that's
I
a
take
big.
that.
Okay, good. I think that's one of the most important things that anybody could take. But I take my antioxidants, I take my anti-inflammatories, and boy, Touchstone Essentials is a great source of all those kind of things. And so's Life Extension. Life Extension is just amazing for that. But other things that's really important are exercise. Okay. And this is something that's really key is exercise. Proper exercise can slow down your aging more than people realize because you keep hearing these stories about too much exercise accelerates your aging and declining health. Not enough exercise accelerates your aging and declining health. But there's this Goldilocks effect, like this bed's too hard, this bed's too soft, but the bed is just right. The bed for exercise that is just right is keep your exercise fun and consistent. Okay. So I run 100-mile ultra marathons. Okay. As you mentioned about in the world records at the beginning, I used to hold the world record for the most 100-mile races run in 1 year. But I never got inflammatory markers to skyrocket or anything like that. I always had fun. And the rule was keep it fun and keep it consistent. I train every day, but I always keep it fun and consistent. Go find adventure, things like that. Also meditation, take your anti-inflammatories, but ALCAT, there's a test called ALCAT that tests for what foods cause inflammation in you. I recommend everybody take it. It's spelled ALCAT, but don't don't put that into your Google search because that'll give you Alcatraz. Do ALCAT test. You'll find companies that sell the ALCAT test, and that'll identify foods that cause inflammation in you. And everybody's different. I take the test every year because it also changes every year. Okay. And so I just stay. So you want to stay away from inflammation. Inflammation accelerates your telomere shortening and therefore accelerates your aging. I would say if people want to know more about not the theories, but the facts about what aging is and why we age and how we age, so they can better understand how not to age. Watch my videos. Okay, I speak at medical conferences all the time at Continuum Medical Education. A lot of times they video record me talking, and there's great videos about this, and they can find these videos by just going to my website, which is www.sierrasci. That's SIERRASCI.com. And they can find this. There's a button there that says key videos and documentary. It also contains key documents where people can really learn about all this kind of stuff. And you'd be amazed at how much I just give away to anybody. Okay, but it's all there. And it's like, there's no theories. There's theories about why we age and how we age, but I explain the facts. Okay. So, but go there. But also if people have questions, and not just about aging and not just about telomeres, but about all aspects of aging, all aspects of health, they can email me. I mean, I spend a lot of time with my lab coat that's hanging right there in the lab, but I love to take breaks, come in, read emails, read questions, and answer them. I love doing that. Okay. So people can ask me questions about cancer, heart disease, multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, everything, rheumatoid arthritis, autoimmune diseases, anything. I'm an expert in all these areas. They can ask me, and I love answering these questions. And for free. I don't do this for
Well, that is wonderful.
It's for fun.
That's wonderful. And I know from a fact that if you search your name on YouTube, there are so many presentations you've given and interviews that you can learn a lot just from watching YouTube, which this will be on YouTube. So that's tremendous that you were that free with your time to answer emails.
I am not in it for the money at all. Yeah, even I'm 74 years old, almost 75. I get Social Security. Every penny of my Social Security benefits goes towards the research here. I mean, that's what I do. I mean, my obsession with life is to find the cures and treatments for everything, and not just aging. So,
Well, Bill, I really appreciate you coming on the show. This was such a great talk. And Liz, if you're watching, thank you for putting us two together. This was a great talk, and I've enjoyed it completely. And I look forward to meeting you in person at an event.
people have to watch your podcast with Liz because I think that's the greatest podcast I've ever watched.
Well, thank
All
you.
right.
You know, for my first longevity interview, I think I hit a home run there, and I think this one is round in third base, Bill, to use
Oh,
that.
this is only your third
Well, for
podcast?
life longevity, I've done thousands of interviews, but I just, I got into life longevity back in August and started working on it, made it my full-time job to find information out about it. And then that's what I do is I produce content. So that was just a natural progression. That when I started going down the rabbit hole, I would start producing content and sharing it because that's what I do. Kind of like you do to a degree. I just share content. I find people and share content.
What was
So
your second one? I haven't seen that podcast.
you're my second one.
Oh, so I thought you said that was the third one. Okay.
No, you're the second one. So I've got you and Liz. That's why I said for my first one, I hit a home run, and you're round in third base. So I feel like I feel like I have a good streak going so far.
I'm not going to miss any.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
Good.
Well, thank you.
200. Year life. Aim higher.